Howdy YouTube, Unky Joe here. Sorry it's been a few days since I last put a video up on YouTube, and today I wanted to cover my NAS or my SAN. I call it a SAN, storage area network. You can call it a NAS, you can call it anything you want. And I want to go over in detail what I use and what I don't use and why I don't use it, and maybe it'll give you some help into figuring out what you want to use. So let's get this video started. Okay, so let's talk about some of your NAS options. What is a NAS? NAS is network attached storage, or SAN is a storage area network. Okay, they're basically the same thing, except the SANs typically have more advanced enterprise features. But let's talk about a NAS for a minute, and then let's talk about RAID, and then let's talk about data protection, and then let's talk about backups. Let's get this out of the way right now. Um, a NAS or a SAN is not a replacement for a good backup. You should always have a backup strategy in place. Either backup to the cloud if you don't have a whole lot of data and a fast internet connection, or backup to a removable hard drive and take that thing off out of your house. So God forbid you get a hurricane, a tornado, a fire, flood, whatever, you don't lose all your data. Okay, that stands to reason. A NAS, RAID, a SAN, they're not replacements for regular data backups. Um, I even go so far as to back up my NAS or my SAN to another server I have with lots of storage on it, just for peace of mind. Anytime I change anything on one, it replicates to another automatically, and there's software out there that'll do that. But let's get into RAID now. Okay, RAID is a redundant array of inexpensive drives. Okay, um, I don't like RAID. There's one RAID level I like, and that's RAID 1 mirroring. Okay, I don't like RAID 5. I don't like RAID 6. Don't like RAID 10. Don't like any of them because I think they're a huge waste of time. They're a huge waste of money as far as drives go. There's a huge waste of money as far as drive controllers go, and really the redundant. I've lost more data in a RAID 5 array than I've never lost data in a RAID 1 array, in a mirrored drive array. Never. Knock wood. Not in 20 plus years of doing this in the industry have I ever lost data on a RAID 1 array. I have lost data on a RAID 5, and here's why. Because when a disk crashes in a RAID 5 array, you typically at least have three drives. Okay, you have the drives are spread across the data spread across three drives, and the parity is on split across them as well. Here's the problem. Say you have three drives in that RAID 5 array that are 5 years old. One of them fails. You take it out. Oh, it's simple. You just put another drive and you rebuild. And then while you're rebuilding the array, drive 2 decides to fail on you. You're screwed. Your data's gone unless you send it to a recovery company. Now, in big enterprise environments, I guess it's okay. I guess it's acceptable because they have cash to throw at the situation. I don't. So I believe in drive mirroring. So disks RAID 0 is when you stripe your data across multiple drives, and it gives you phenomenal speed. But if one of those drives fails, you lose all your data. So RAID 0 is not a good solution. It used to be back in the day, if you were video editing, you could buy 3 or 4 or 5 hard drives and RAID 0 them and have lots of storage and lots of speed because it's writing across multiple platters. That's the idea. The problem is one of the drive fails, you're screwed, all the data's gone. So another good reason to have good backups. Um, the problem with RAID 0 now is you have SSD drives that are so fast that even drives in a RAID 0 configuration are typically slower reading and writing to a drive than a single SSD drive. So skip RAID 0. That's just my opinion. I'm sure I'm gonna have people yelling and screaming, "Oh, RAID 0 is the best thing that ever happened." Bullshit. It didn't. It just didn't. If it is for your situation, go for it. If you're willing to take that risk, I'm not. So I always use RAID 1. um, Now, then there's talk out there again about other things like bit rot. What is bit rot? Well, bit rot is, a hard drive has a spinning platter. It's coated with it's got a magnetically coated surface, and the head goes around and it can flip a bit from 0 to 1. Well, you get cosmic rays coming in, you get ultraviolet light, you get, if the drive is moving and there's a big bang on the floor or something, the heads can move, and you can get data corrupted on your drive. Um, I have only in 25 years in this business experienced bit rot 2 times, where I've had files that were unrecoverable, and only a few files, and having a good backup has always saved my ass in the long run from bit rot. Well, Microsoft has come out with what they call the REFS file system, which is supposed to do checksumming on the data and prevent that from happening. And then you have, on the Linux side, you have something called ZFS. Okay, well, that's fine. I like Microsoft products, been selling them for years. They work well for me. They're not cheap. Their server software is expensive, but it works. It's reliable. ZFS, yeah, ZFS is great. It prevents bit rot. Everybody touts it. Oh, it's wonderful. But it takes a shitload of memory. I mean, a shitload. Just to start off with ZFS, like on FreeNAS, you're looking at 16 gigabytes worth of error correcting RAM just to get it to run with a ZFS in simple mirroring. And if you do parity, it's even worse. It takes even more RAM. The other thing is that I don't know if you've ever used FreeNAS, but it's slow. I've spent countless hours building a FreeNAS server and trying to get it up and running. And my data speeds, it was always, my transfer speeds were always below 100 megabits per second or megabytes per second. And I could never figure it out why. Well, why? Because it's got the Samba version of SMB in it, and Samba has never been tweaked correctly. It takes a lot of manual GUI or graphical user interface. I'm sorry. It takes a lot of editing at the command line to get Samba set up right. And why? I could use a Windows 7 or a Windows 10 machine. SMB is built into it, and it just works, and it doesn't have high RAM overhead. So I'm getting a little off subject here. I don't like ZFS. I don't like FreeNAS. If you like it, great, use it. Go ahead. I don't really care. But what I'm going to talk about today is something called drive pooling software, and it's what I use. Now, Microsoft came out with drive pooling software, and they built it into Windows 8. It's built into Windows 10, and it's built into the server operating systems. And what it basically allows you to do is take drives, dissimilar drives, although I don't recommend that. It allows you to take dissimilar drives, put them all together in one big pool of drives, and then divvy those drives up into virtual drives any way you want to. The other thing it allows you to do is thin provision, so you can tell it, even if you only have 1 terabyte of storage physical, you can tell it this is a 5 terabyte volume, and it'll dynamically expand it. So that's what I've used it. I like it. The problem with drive pooling is that when you enable mirroring on it, you have to mirror everything. You can't pick and choose what you want to mirror. For me, that's a problem. For example, I have terabytes worth of ripped DVDs and Blu-rays on my Plex server, but I don't necessarily, I have the originals. I only rip what I own. I have the originals in the rack. And so if I were to lose my DVDs, it's no big deal. Is it going to take me a lot of time to restore that data? Yeah, sure it is. But that's why I have a backup. So I have a large enough drive where I can back up all that stuff to an external drive or to another server and get the data back in the event it's lost. What I don't want to lose are my photos, my YouTube videos, my music collection, my files that I use for business. So what this drive pooling software that I'm using allows me to do is I can actually go folder by folder and tell it, oh, I want to duplicate this folder, I want to duplicate this folder and these files in this folder. And so after a lot of searching and a lot of looking, I came up with a couple of different products, and we're going to go over those today. And I'm going to tell you why I chose one over the other. And one other thing I want to cover while we're on the subject is if you're not a systems builder, if you don't have any experience in it, you just want reliable data storage and you want to get a NAS in your house, there's actually one product that I recommend that above and beyond and gives you features that you may not think you'll use them. That's a home NAS server. And the one that I recommend is right here on the screen. It's the Synology DiskStation DS1515 Plus. Uh, it is not cheap. I think it's about 600 or 700 bucks on Amazon right now, and it's worth every penny. And that's without drives. So you still have to buy drives to populate that device with. But the built-in software that it has is unparalleled. You can share files with people out on the internet. You can give people access. There's a bunch of other stuff you can do with it. Barnacules Nerdgasm had a really good review on this unit, and I have used the software, the DiskStation software, and I like it. And one of the other benefits is if you're running a Plex server, you can actually run the Plex server on the DiskStation, and it actually is tweaked and tuned specifically for that Synology NAS, and it runs very well. Down in the notes down below, I'll put a link to Barnacules' YouTube video on this Synology, so you can get some more information on it. So here's what I use. I use a program called DriveBender. Now, here's the deal with DriveBender. It's from a company that it's actually a private individual wrote this years ago as a direct replacement when when Windows quit making Windows Home Server. They left kind of a gap in the market with their drive pooling software. So this guy came in and developed the software called DriveBender, and then this company Division M, as in Mary, bought him out. And actually, DriveBender, I don't think there's been an update to it in years, and it's got good community support. But the software, I think it costs you $5.95 per machine per license. So it's like it's not a free or open source program, but they're pretty much giving it away. Now, DriveBender, there's another product as well. Let me pull it up for you here, and it's called StableBit Drive Pool, which is basically the same as a DriveBender. Has the same features, but it costs $29.95 for a license. And not only did I choose DriveBender because of the price, see it's $29.95 to buy, but I also chose it because it seemed to be faster, more stable. I didn't have any trouble with it. Plus, the added benefit is I bought 3 licenses, so I can run on 3 different machines, and I still only paid $18 for it instead of $29. So, but whatever you choose is fine. And StableBit has a bit more support than DriveBender does. They also have another product with StableBit, and that's called StableBit Scanner, which will actually go out there and keep your drive scanned for errors and smart errors and surface errors and that kind of thing. And that's an add-on. But let's focus on DriveBender. So you got pool management. It has really good performance. You can expand the drive pools with any type of new drive, internal, external, USB, whatever you want to do. You can merge data, you can merge files, etc. You can add or remove drives from the pool without losing your data, etc. The one really nice thing is that it has hard drive smart integration, so it'll tell you the temperatures and keep the defect levels of the drive you can monitor. If you're using Windows Server 2012 Essentials, and it has integrated dashboard support, you've got redundancy, and they use file duplication down at the folder level as their primary means of redundancy, and the data is written to 2 drives simultaneously. They also have a neat little feature called landing zone, so you can tell it anytime I write a new file to this pool or this array, I want to specifically go to this drive first, fill this drive first, and then duplicate on the others. And then as this drive fills, go to the next drive. So where that would be handy is if you had a mix of SSDs and spinning drives, you could tell it, hey, write to my SSDs first, and then later during maintenance operations, you can migrate or duplicate that data to a spinning drive or whatever. It also has thin provisioning, which I don't use, but you can if you want to. Pooling drives on remote servers you can do. It has remote client management, so I can run the actual DriveBender client on my local workstation with it running on the server, and you've got email notifications. Now, Drive Vendor is supported on Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 8.1, Windows 10, and all Windows Server products. Now, if I were you and you can't afford Windows Server, you can put it on an older Windows machine. What I did is I have a Core i3 machine that was originally going to be my let me get my webcam up here. That was originally going to be my Hackintosh unit. It's using a Gigabyte H97N motherboard with an i3 processor, 16 gig of RAM, or 8 gig of RAM, sorry. It's in an Antec case, and then I purchased a, what is it called? A fat cage, Icy Dock fat cage, 5x3. So it allows you to convert three 5.25 inch drive bays to three 5.25 inch drive bays to five 3.5 inch drive bays, and you can also put SSD drives in this thing as well, 2.5 inch. So that's what I did. I threw an IC dock into an Antec case with a Core i3, 8 gig of RAM. I installed Windows Server 2012 R2 on it because that's what I like to use, but you could use Windows 7 if you've got an old Windows 7 license laying around. And then I installed the Drive Vendor product onto that. So now what I want to do is take you through and show you a little bit about Drive Vendor and why I like it so much. Alright, so here's a screenshot of my Windows server. I call it my SAN unit, Storage Area Network. Call it NAS, whatever you want to. And in it I have a 500 gigabyte boot drive as disk 0, as you can see here. And then I have DB1 through 4. And each one of these is a 2 terabyte Seagate regular spinning hard drive. They're a serial ATA3 interface. Yeah. And then you'll notice down here I have this pool drive, which is 8 terabytes. So these are all 2 terabyte drives. 2 times 4 is 8, minus the overhead. So you can see that I have just 4 regular 2 terabyte drives in here and then a 500 gigabyte boot drive. Let's go to the Drive Vendor screen now. So under Drive Vendor, you can see those 4 volumes, DB1, DB2, DB3, DB4. So all I did was create a pool out of those 4 drives. The drives that are in gray here are extra drives that are not within the pool. And you can even see right now, I am streaming, or I am recording a video from Open Broadcast Studio, and it even shows you the file that is open, the read and write speed in kilobits per second, or kilobytes per second, little big B. And it'll even tell you, if you look up here, what drive it's actually writing to right now. One of the other beautiful things about Drive Vendor is this little feature right, let me switch my view here, is right here. If I click on this little link right here, Drive Vendor pulls up, it tells me what model drive it is, the serial number, the volume ID number. This can be very important if you ever have a crash system. Drive Vendor names your drives. It uses a folder structure, so you need to pay attention to this if ever you lose one of the drives or they become corrupted. It tells me my smart status, like the drive is healthy, smart report is excellent, drive performance features. It tells me how much space on that actual drive is used, how many primary files. I could map a drive letter. I could set this as a landing zone, as we spoke of before. I could do a disk check against the volume. I could ping it to make sure it's okay. And then down here it tells me all my smart status, which is really, really helpful, including the current temperature and how many days the drive has been running. So if I come over here to, let me come down here, show smart attributes. This is one of the other nice things about Drive Vendor, is I can pull up my smart attributes up here and look at the smart attributes at a glance and see if the drive is running okay. So this is one of the main things that made me choose Drive Vendor over uh, over the other product we were talking about a brief period ago, which is StableBit. StableBit, in order to get your monitoring, is you have to purchase a StableBit scanner separately. I did not want to do that, so I chose instead to go with DrivePool. It gives you a nice little pie chart over here that tells you you're viewing your mount point, which is pool one. Tells you your primary use, duplicate, how much space you have free, how much is non-pooled usage. You got your health status right up here, your pool status, your drive performance, and your smart status. And then down here it tells you how much is how much is used, occupied by what type of files. And it's pretty darn accurate in its calculations there as well. Uh, you have an options screen up here, so if we click on that, you can, these are some of the options you have, like drive volume renaming. The volume rename option simply renames the drive when it's added to the drive pool. Doing this makes it easier to identify. You can do drive letter management, Windows autoplay. Your safety, you can enable CRC validation, so it actually does a CRC check on every file that's written to the disk. Now, you can, the beauty of Drive Vendor is it doesn't use any proprietary file system at all. It uses the native NTFS file system within Server 2012. It'll also allow you to use, if you format the volumes as REFS, so not only can you enable CRC validation on Drive Vendor, but then you could additionally enable REFS, format your drives as REFS, and have that additional layer of protection against bit rot. I don't turn CRC file validation on. I just haven't had a need to use it. And no, I do not format my volumes REFS. Because Apple also has a problem writing to, if you have a Mac, it has a problem writing to REFS volumes, so I leave mine at NTFS. Then you have the Performance tab, so you can enable Smooth Stream for reading media files or for reading all files. You can set your logging level. Balancing is file balancing, so what it tries to do, Drive Vendor tries to do, is balance the level of files across all 4 drives so that an equal amount of space is occupied. And if I move this out of the way, you can see all 4 of these drives have pretty much an equal amount of space in use on them. So that's what the balancing does. And then you have some options down here for your balancing method and whether you want to clear your landing zone. Notifications. So if there's any updates to Drive Vendor or Smart Event notifications, I could have it send me an email. Security, that ensures certain key features will require authentication. So nobody could connect up and see your data without authentication, but since I'm using Windows Server, I use Active Directory and NTFS and share permissions to handle that. I'm not going to go over my license because I don't want you to see my license keys. You can also do map pool drives to a mount folder. So it uses the Windows Drive mounting feature to create mount points on individual pool drives. And then those drive mount points can be accessed via the shortcut on the product start menu and allow direct access to the pool drive. The problem is that could result in the content of the pool drives being changed. So they recommend you keep it disabled unless there's a specific reason to enable it. You can do folder linking. You can dismount a mount point during drive remove or swap. And if the drive goes offline, it tells you what mode it's going to put it in, and that's fault tolerant mode. This setting places the pool in a read-only state. The pools can be accessed and the file can be read, however it can't be written to. And then balancing load detection if you want to turn that on. And then your interface, you can do a Metro Blue, Metro Green, you could do a light, dark, etc. See what else we got over here. Alright, so I'm just going to cancel on that. And then the part about Drive Vendor that I love is this little feature right here called duplication. So I spoke to you about how I use RAID level 1 for typically all my setups. I always I always have two drives and a RAID 1 mirror. They're fast. There's no write speed impact. There's no read impact on it, and you get some redundancy with it. Still not a replacement for the backups. But what I love about Drive Pool, whereas if I were to use Drive Pool under Windows, it's just going to mirror the drives. When I tell it, hey, mirror these two virtual disks, it mirrors everything on them. What Drive Pool allows me to do is go in here and tell it, hey, I want to do duplication on based on folders. So for example, I've got all my apps here under a shared folder called apps, and that's where I keep all my program originals. But I really don't care if I lose all that data. It does get backed up every day, but I really don't, it's not a big impact if that data gets lost. However, there are a few folders on here, for example, like my Microsoft Partner Downloads folder that I want to keep duplicated. I don't want to lose these files because I have a slow internet connection. It's a pain in the butt to re-download all these files. So I can come over here and I can validate the duplication. I can remove duplication. You can duplicate the entire folder. You can duplicate only certain files under the folders. Um, Let me just show you what a duplicated file looks like. If we drill down into this folder, like my ADK setup. So if I come here to duplicate, I could remove on the folder or on the selected folder and child folders. I could validate the duplication. Let's just see what happens if I did that. Oh, I can't do it while I'm in the view. Okay, so can't do that. But it tells you down here, this icon indicates the folders were marked for duplication. Any file placed in this folder will be duplicated. Okay, and then it tells you, the actual icon tells you that the file has been duplicated. So if I go up here to details, it'll tell you this file has been duplicated. It's on two different volumes, and here's where that volume name comes in handy, right here, this long string right here, right? And then I've got tools, so I could search for non-duplicated, search for all duplicated. I'm not going to go into huge detail on here, but you can see what a space saver this is. So for example, I have all my movies or my videos saved in my video folder. And then I can go and I can select each video folder that I want to have duplicated, and then the files within it as well. So if I didn't want to duplicate my action adventure videos, I could just flip that switch off and it would stop the duplication. So I guess in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is that this is a great way to get that RAID 1 redundancy without eating up all of your disk space with just RAID 1 mirroring. Plus it has a nice little graphical interface, and it has the smart monitoring, and it has all the other neat features I mentioned previously. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that's the solution I use here. So I've got all my videos, I've got all my Unky Joe's Playhouse videos, everything on one big massive storage server. And the only job it does is it stores files, keeps them redundant, keeps them online, keeps them ready for me to access at any time. Now, if you're not into this kind of thing, if you're not into rolling your own, as they say, then perhaps a Synology NAS we mentioned earlier right here is a better way for you to go. And frankly, for most people, this is going to be a better way to go. You don't have to get the 5-drive version. That's the one I prefer. And frankly, if I could afford this device, I would get it. But I'm not going to drop $700 on a box to store files when I've got the equipment laying around where I can do my own. Synology's RAID setup redundancy is excellent. The write speeds on it, I typically get write speeds of 100 to 120 megabytes per second using a gigabit connection on the server I have. The Synology, what I did was I virtualized it, put it on a virtual machine with virtual hard drives. I got the exact same throughput reading and writing to a hard drive. So that's why I recommend the Synology. If you're going to go with something like NAS for free, or you're going to go with something like free NAS, you just better prepare yourself for a lot of tweaking on the Samba to get that thing to run as fast as Windows does natively. I'm a Windows shop. I love Linux. I use Linux in lots of different applications, but they're application specific. But for my file servers, I run Windows File Server or I run the Windows operating system, and I personally like Drive Bender. Now, full disclaimer here, I have never, ever, ever, ever had to try to recover data off of a failed drive in Drive Pool because I, knock wood, haven't had a drive fail yet. I've had some people say, hey, oh, it's horrible. It's horrible. I lost all my data. And it's usually because people don't follow the procedures, the steps to go through recovering a volume that's failed, or they misidentify the volume that's failed and replace the wrong drive, and then it just gets confused, and human error is going to creep in. That's just going to happen. So I have not lost any data with Drive Bender, but I haven't lost any drives. So I really couldn't test it, and I'm not willing to pull a live drive out and try to get it to crash to see what happens. Maybe in another episode I'll put together a virtual Drive Bender machine and we'll play around with it and see if I can get it to crash. If that's something you'd like to see, let me know down in the notes or the comments and I'll see what I can do. But that is what I use for my file services and for file sharing on my network here at my home office. Uh, a NAS, a SAN. Who was it that told me that everybody should own a NAS? Who was it? Barnacles or was it J2 Cents? It might have been J2 Cents. Everybody should have a home NAS. Don't trust your data to the cloud. Leave your data on a home server where it's easily accessible. It's faster. You don't have to suck up your internet bandwidth sending and receiving files over the internet. Put your home data on a home server. Do a backup to an external drive. Those Western Digital Passport drives are great for backups, and go throw it in your safety deposit vault or give it to your neighbor and have them put it in their home. So God forbid if anything happens to your home, you got your data. It's a real simple backup solution. But don't trust your data to the cloud because someday those companies might be out of business. And do they have a situation where you get your data back? I don't know. How many times have we been screwed around by OneDrive and Dropbox and these other file sharing services, even Google Drive? And what happens when these companies go out of business? Does your data go with them? Are they sharing your data? I'm not a paranoid freak about my data, but why would I want them knowing what I'm doing or what I'm using? Uh, so keep that in mind. Everybody needs a NAS in their home to store their files on. That's just my opinion. All right. Thanks for watching the video. We'll see you next time.